Well, hello there, my lovelies, and happy Friday from all the way down here in New Zealand. As my title says, it's on the road again, but this time it's on the road again by myself without the band, so you might hear more about that over the weekend. But anyway, welcome to Romance from the Red Couch. My name is Toni Kenyon. And if you haven't met me before, I'm a rock star and a billionaire romance writer, and Friday afternoons I come to you from my trusty couch to talk about what I've been up to and how damn fast the weekend has, not the weekend, how damn fast the week has disappeared again. And I am very much looking forward to my weekend. And I can report for those of you who watched last week that I did in fact have a weekend off. And I'm planning to have another weekend off because I'm going down country to see a lovely girlfriend of mine that I haven't caught up with for quite some time. So I will be road tripping, and there may be video, or there may be some interesting mood of various different suburbs on the way. So keep an eye out. And what has been happening in Romancelandia for me this week? I have, of course, put out my usual installment of the King Brothers, which should have winged its way, or an email should have winged its way to your inbox on Tuesday, if you're on the Tuesday list, to find out that it had been released. And if you're not on the Tuesday list, you should get my weekly roundup today with a lovely picture of the cat. It's the cat's turn this week, and mainly because the dog is shedding like a demon, and I have spared you the photographs of the inches of white retriever fur, which is rolling like tumbleweeds across our floor at the moment. So that's the pet update. Not much of a garden update. Tomatoes coming along nicely, which is good. In the writing update, I've been doing a lot of non-fiction writing this week, which is a wonderful change for me, and I am enjoying it. And I have been writing about self-love and looking after one's self, and which is probably quite appropriate since I've done far too many back-to-back weekends of work. So there you go. The universe has a fascinating and interesting way of reminding us that we do eventually have to look after ourselves, or we just simply fall down. What else have I been up to? I was looking at doing a yoga challenge, but I kind of came down with something. I don't know if it's, a combination of spring doing what it does to people like me who get all nasty with all of those lovely blossoms, or a bit of an old winter cold, but whatever. So there was too much muscular pain going on, so I had to give the yoga a little bit of a rest, but I'm hoping to get back to that fairly soon. And the other thing that has been on my mind this week is synchronicity. Some of you may know, or I may have mentioned that one of my sons is in the UK at the moment, and if you find my accent interesting, it is a combination of having been born in Manchester and spending the first decade of my life in the United Kingdom, and then coming to New Zealand. So it's a little bit of a cross-pollination type accent. And at the moment, my youngest son happens to be in my hometown, and this week sent me some photographs of places, or what he described as my old haunts, which were basically a photograph of the house that I grew up in, and also of the school that I used to go to in Manchester. And I cannot tell you how interesting it is as an adult to see something like that. And the other thing that he talked about was the synchronicity involved. The day that he went to take a look at the house was the anniversary of the day that he left New Zealand 12 months ago. And the house number was actually the number of years that we left England. So, the universe has some of those, moments that that do make you think. So it's been a strange week for me, thinking about my past and looking at my present, and it may sound strange, but I have been where I am for a number of years, like a number of decades, and I've effectively grown up in New Zealand, and I do consider myself a New Zealander, even though I still travel on a British passport. And I've never really had a hankering to go. A lot of my relatives talk about home, and I've never really had a hankering to go home. But sometimes when some of your close family are on the other side of the world and they're sending you reminders of what your life was like, it does strange things to you. So I've been dreaming a lot about being in the UK and thinking a lot about my early childhood, and looking at those photographs was incredibly interesting because it made me think about perception, and that's one of the things that I think about often when I'm writing, whether what I have going on in my head translates through the page. And obviously I have no control over what goes on in your head when you're reading, and I hope that somewhere along the way there might be a meeting of minds. But even just seeing a photograph of somewhere that I think of in a certain way in my head, and key points of the building that I remember being in the photograph, but just stuff like it, you know, it looks so much smaller than it did to me as a child. And I guess that's about being a child and your perception as a child. So it's been interesting for me to look at that sort of stuff. And it's also been really interesting for my son to go back to where I was born and see places as a tourist that he has heard his extended family talk about for many, many years. And luckily for him, his grandmother's been there with him, my mother. So there has been that wonderful generational exchange, which I think is just such a special thing as well. Story is often about messages and carrying on maybe family traditions, or people talk about families in terms of stories. And it's been really interesting for me this week to watch this little episode of this family story sort of expose itself. And it's going to be really interesting when my mum comes back from the UK, because she lives here with us, obviously. And it's going to be really interesting to hear her take on showing him and hear her side of the story. So, you know, story's just so intertwined in our lives in so many different ways. It's not just written and, you know, on screen, but obviously it's also oral. And my son's a musician as well, so I have no doubt whatsoever that there will be lots of material in that intergenerational time that he's had in a place that holds so many memories for different parts of his family, for him to interpret that through song. And so I'm really looking forward to hearing my mother's version of her story of those events. And I think that's one of the reasons that I like writing in two points of view, even though I write in first person, because I like to write my stories through the eyes of the people in the story. I still like to have two sides of it, because it doesn't matter who is telling a story. 3, 5, 10, 15 people can see the same incident, and you can interview each of them about it, and every one of them will have their own special take on what they saw and what happened and the turn of events. And so that's what I find so fascinating about life. I find story is intertwined in life all over the place. And it's been wonderful for me this week to watch my mother and my son write a new little chapter of their story and my family story for the rest of us to tell to other members of the family. So that's my take on story for you this week. I will be writing a travel story this weekend, so if you'd like to come along for the ride, that would be wonderful. I will try and post some interesting photographs, and you might even get some video as well. And other than that, thank you again for spending some time with me. If you're watching this in the replay, which most of you usually do, because most of you are asleep by the time that I do this. If you're watching in the replay, leave me some love. You know I love the hearts. Let me know what you've got planned for the weekend. Let me know what you think of this week's King Brothers. I am interested to see what you're going to do with Liam and Alana next. And I will catch you again in another week. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your support. Take care. Look after each other. Show somebody some love. Tell somebody that you love them. Thanks again for being here. Bye-bye.